Hi, this is Stan, and it's November 2nd, 2025, and it's our fallback day, right? If you know what I mean by that, right? Our clocks, right? Um, so, we're going to be doing this by video. Last week we didn't do chapter 15 by video because we were all here, but we're not going to be able to do it today due to, the same medical problems, okay? So we're just going to ask the Lord for his help as we look into this word today, okay? Lord God, I do ask for your grace and your mercy upon us. We always need it. We're always standing in need of it because we are needy creatures. You made us that way. So, Lord, right now we just ask for the bread of life. That is through your word, Lord, the manna for the day. We ask that it might be enough for each one of us, no matter what the need may be. That because the words that you speak unto us, they are spirit and they are life. And we thank you for that in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. So we're going to be going into chapter 16 of Genesis. So we're going to continue our look at the life of Abraham. Okay, let's go there. All right. Okay. All right, 16:1 here it says, and now Sarah, I should say Sarai. It's hard to get used to these two names because Sarai becomes Sarah and Abram becomes Abraham. But we always talk about them as Sarah and Abraham, right? Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children, and she had a handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said unto Abram, Behold, now the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai, and Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. And he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarai said unto Abram, My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between me and thee. But Abram said unto Sarai, Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarai dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. And the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way of Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence comest thou, and whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself under her hands. We're going to stop there. Okay. So now we see a full situation unfolding. It's just a drama, basically, isn't it? And now remember, the passage opens with these words. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children. Remember I said that Genesis 11:30 is ringing like a bell? Let's go back there and just refresh your memory on what that is. 11:30 is this statement way back when we were talking about Terah, the father, and Abraham and Lot and the wives and so forth. This is before they went to Haran, or before they left for the Chaldees. It says here, but Sarai was barren, she had no child. And I said that this was going to ring like a bell throughout the story because it was all about an inheritance, about an heir, about descendants. But she has no children. So now we go back to 16, the Lord re-rings the bell for us. It's because time has gone by and he wants us to remember this fact about Sarah. This is so important. And why is it important? Because in 15, what did he say? Right? He said, Behold, as is that when he appeared, came to him in a vision. He said, Behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, This shall not be thine heir. In other words, Eliezer, someone born in your house. But he that shall come forth from thine own bowels, which is the word for loins, that's an old English word, we don't use anymore for that, shall be thine heir. So he knows that he shall be the father, the physical father of this child, this heir that's going to inherit everything that the Lord's given him. So now we know this is the most prior chapter. So now we learn for the first time in 15 that the heir, the descendants, are going to be actually coming from him. It's not going to be someone in his I get whatever you want to call it, clan or tribe or commune, whatever you want to call it. It's about 1,000 people, we believe, is traveling with him. So his foreman, Eliezer, is not going to be your heir, even though he's your most trusted servant. He's not going to be the one that gets it. In other words, the Lord is going to cause an heir to come forth from Abraham. But when we get into 16, we learn this. That this bell that's been ringing so long, they're like, what are we going to do? He's 85 years old now. She's 75 if they're in the land for 10 years. So now they're getting, I think, quite anxious. 10 years is a long time. Now, actually, it's longer than that because he's been in the land for 10 years, but he's had this promise for at least 15 years, maybe more, because back in the Ur of the Chaldees, the Lord appeared to him to tell him that he was going to make him a great nation, right? Well, that's a long time learning about that. So, hearing about this, and the Lord has been telling him over and over since that time. In chapter 12, a couple of times, in chapter 13, he talks about him having descendants as numerous as the dust of the ground. In 15, he talks about they'll be as numerous as the stars of the sky, and that's going to be someone coming from you directly. But they've been talking about this every night, maybe, or all the time, and all the people know all about this. So this is a big, big deal because God's been saying this. But Sarah is barren. This is the big obstacle to having an heir, isn't it? There's none being produced, naturally speaking. But this was her idea. This is what I think. I don't think that a woman would voluntarily give another woman to her own husband to have a child through unless she was in a state of desperation. Because that's what happened with Rachel. Later on in Jacob's life, who's his grandson, he does the same thing. Rachel has no children, so she gives her handmaid Bilhah to Jacob to have a child through her. And she has two through her. Through her. So Sarah is the first one to do this. And the thing in the culture was this. Hagar is Sarah's property. That's how those cultures were. So if a child is born to a slave, then the slave owner owns the child as well. That's just the way they had it. We can look at a couple of relevant passages. If we go to Exodus, which the law is written 430 years later, but this is Mosaic law coming out later on. In the book of Exodus, chapter 21, okay, and verse 4. This is if they have a Hebrew servant. In other words, someone who's an indentured servant, a fellow Hebrew. This is not a slave per se, but they're indentured, which means all the while they're paying off a debt their own, really, by the other Hebrew at the time. But it says here, if you buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and the 7th he shall go out free for nothing, because he's a brother. Okay, you can't keep him. If he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master had given him a wife, which is kind of what's happening in Genesis here with Sarah. If his master had given him a wife, she shall have borne him, and she have borne him sons or daughters. The wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself. See that? Now that's in the rule concerning Hebrew servants. Now, in Leviticus 25, there's a different and related law here to ownership of foreign slaves. Okay. Let's get the actual verse here. Give me a second. Let's go to verse 44 there. Okay. Both thy bondmen and thy bondmaids, these are servants, which thou shalt have, shall be of the heathen that are round about you. Now, Hagar's from Egypt. Now, they've not established a nation yet, so keep that in mind, that Abraham is not part of the Hebrew nation. He's a patriarch of that nation, but that's a long time coming before this. But here's the rule that God has for them. If they have a heathen, a foreign slave, or a, male or female, that are round about you, of them you shall buy bondmen and bondmaids. You can buy a slave. You can buy, this is what it says here. Moreover, of the children of the strangers that do sojourn among you, of them you shall buy. In other words, if someone's coming in from an outside your borders, okay, and of their families that are with you, which they begat in your land, they shall be your possession. And you shall take them as an inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them for possession. So the families of slaves stay with the family that bought them. So this is foreigners now. With Hebrews, you let them go after 6 years because they're Hebrew brethren, and the Sabbath law refers to them because they're all descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yeah, so there's a distinction being made. Now, if we go back to Genesis chapter 16 here, look what she says, that I may obtain children by her. So I believe this is part of their world. This is part of their world for going all the way back into Egypt, and now with Abraham, and then later on with the Israelites. There's nothing really much different about the slave laws in the law of Moses that are not part of the world of their day. I think people think of slavery as what we had in our country, but we're very much removed from this kind of situation. What the Lord did was He regulated it. He wasn't out to change it all these things right away. So, but that's the idea. So she says, I may obtain children by her, meaning she's that child or children are really coming from me because I own the one that I'm given to you for a wife or a concubine, really. And Sarai says, and Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian. Remember, she's now a foreigner, okay, to them, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land. And of Canaan, and gave her to her husband, Abram, to be his wife. Now, this would be actually a concubine by arrangement, because Hagar is not a full-fledged wife, because she's not Sarah's peer. Sarah owns her, so therefore she's not a peer. She's not an equal wife, like in a polygamous situation. Because in a polygamous situation in their day, wives were peers of each other, and concubines were secondary wives. This is what they are. Now, I know this arrangement seems very odd to us, because we're reading this very closely and we're kind of putting ourselves into the situation, and it seems a bit like it's unsettling actually to us. It's kind of like just unsettling, it's just disturbing to our sensibilities, because we have Christian sensibilities about it, okay? But in their day, not so much, okay? This is a very agreeable arrangement. The Lord has not told them who the mother will be. That's been left out of the Lord's statements made to Abraham so far. So what I think is going on here, I'm going to give you what I can deduce from this. I believe this is a test, because what will they do when they find they're up against a problem like this? I was thinking, marriage is really between 2 people. That's the way God made it, and that's the way it should be. And I think people even back then kind of knew that marriages should be between two people, a man and a wife, a man and a woman, and male and female who are eligible for each other. And that's the way it's always been. They never, as far as we know, ever had any concubinage going on with Abraham. Now, at least not recorded. So, but I do want to, before I move on from this verse, I want to take a moment here for the word 10. They were in the land for 10 years. Now think about this. If the Lord, I believe the Lord had told him back in Ur of the Chaldees that he was going to make of him a great nation, from what we read in chapter 12 there, verse 1, I'll make of you a great nation. And everything afterward was all about having this heir. The number 10 has often been associated with a number of things in the Bible. Okay. One of them, of course, we have the 10 Commandments. This is the summary of the covenant, right? The 10 Commandments. We have the 10 plagues of Egypt. We have, where he put them under judgment. And 10 was the number that completed the judgment. In Numbers 14, we have the Lord complaining against the Israelites who had gone into Canaan and came back, 10 of them with a bad report. And the Lord said, they have tested me these 10 times. In other words, putting him to the test 10 different times, since they saw the miracles and his glory and all these other things that should have made them stop trying to test him all the time. So it was 10 tests. So I think 10 here is like a test. Like 10 years has gone by, 85 and 75 are their ages. So what are we going to do? Do we wait for God to complete this, or do we have to take some action here? This is a good, people run across this question all the time. They run across this question, when they're trying to figure out what to do, and they believe that they should trust the Lord, but what should I do? I mean, a lot of people have a conflict with this. Should I do anything to try to help myself, or is this wrong? Now, the guide that we have here in answering this question is that you can do whatever you want to try to get something done, as long as you're not violating some kind of a principle. Here there's a violation of a principle of one man and one wife and one woman. That's a violation. But the culture has made it okay. And I'm going to tell you, every single culture has this problem of making something okay that really is against God's order. For example, let's talk about this sort of thing. They had polygamy. Polygamy was tolerated by the Lord. Concubinage was tolerated by the Lord. Concubines were not full-fledged wives, but polygamy was also not adultery. I mean, I know people have a hard time with this one too. Polygamy and concubinage in their day was not considered adulterous, right? And adultery was only committed against the man. So if a man had another woman, he's not committing adultery against a wife, because we don't have that kind of rule in this situation, because what does it say in the 10 Commandments? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Not husband or wife, but wife. So the law favored the man's arrangement. I know it sounds unfair, but that's just the way it was in their day. Now in the New Testament, that's been updated by the Lord himself. The Lord, when he came to earth, was all about making people understand the point of the law that they had been reading for all their history. But remember, he said, they say this, but I say this to you. He said, thou shalt not murder, but I say, if you hate someone, you're murdering. He said, you shall not commit adultery, but if you even look at someone with that desire, who's a married woman or whatever, if you're a married man, you're committing adultery, right? But in Mark chapter 10, verse 11, in speaking about divorce and remarriage, okay, he says this, and he saith unto them, that is the Pharisees there, whosoever shall put away his wife that is divorced, Not adding a wife, but putting away his wife, getting rid of her, according to the rule in Deuteronomy 24. You can give a wife a certificate of divorcement. So if you do that and marry another woman, he commits adultery against her. That's kind of a shocking statement. He's committing adultery against her. So this, as to my understanding, is a new idea in regard to the doctrine of adultery in the Bible. Because a man can commit adultery against his wife if he puts her away and gets someone else. Now going back to Genesis, okay, we were 16. This is not what's happening. Abraham is not putting away Sarah. Sarah is the one in charge of this whole arrangement. So, first of all, when a woman was barren in their day, that was considered a stigma. It's something that people, either openly or privately, certainly looked down on women that were barren. They thought it was a judgment from God. If a woman was barren, they thought they were under the judgment of God for evil in their lives. And other things like that, because, that would occur to them. So that what kind of state of mind she has to be in to make this happen. I'm telling you, it's got to be something else, boy. Concubine. So he listens to her, and then it says here in verse 4, he says, he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. Oh my gosh. Oh, she is showing she's now on top. She's the mother of the heir of the promises of God. Whoa. There's an awful lot going on inside of Hagar's head over this. And she went from being slave to being over top of her mistress because she has an ability her mistress lacks. She's superior. She's looking down her nose at Sarah. Whoa. Oh my gosh. Well, however long this went on, I don't know, but it must have been on for a little while. And so what's Sarah's reaction? And Sarai said unto Abram, my wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom. In other words, there's now a sexual, romantic affection between the two of you. And when she saw that she had conceived, bringing forth the heir, as far as they know, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judged between me and thee. Now I got to tell you something. This is a confession on my part. When I read this complaint by Sarah, I thought, wait a minute. I said, this is your idea. This is your idea. Why are you complaining about something that happened and it was your idea? But John Gill, I was reading John Gill, and he totally corrected me on this. So he was really, really good on this verse. Because he made me see it in a different light. What he said basically was this. That Abraham, notice Abraham's being blamed. This is why I said it's her fault, not Abraham's fault. Abraham's being blamed for something he was doing in this matter. He was allowing this servant, this concubine, who's Sarah's property, to lord it over his wife. That was on him. By his omission, and perhaps even his affections were more toward Hagar, you can imagine and understand it, at least we can understand it, is that if she's the mother of the heir, she's the most important person in his life right now. Sarah could be sidelined. Sarah knows all this. So that's why she says, my wrong, in other words, my mistake be on you. Why? Because you're not doing anything about her treatment of me. That's the point that John Gill points out. Said, I gave my maid to your bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. How dare she? The Lord judge between me and thee. In other words, she's calling on the Lord that he himself would be on her side. And she's right. Because as the husband, he's the head of the house. His wife is his wife. That status does not change because she's barren. And that's a fault. In other words, she's kind of being kicked when she's down over the barrenness. And Hagar is being, she is being superior-minded, condescending. You know, I don't know, maybe, she's from Egypt, and Pharaoh had given her to them when they were in Egypt during the famine and all that. We learned that from Genesis 12:16, when Pharaoh had given them male and female servants and sheep and oxen and all kinds of things like that. So, and Sarah and Hagar would have been among them, right? So she was expatriated by Pharaoh. I mean, officially expatriated. So that's what she's got, right? So she doesn't like being out of her country, I guess, or something was going on with her, right? That she does this. Well, boy, did she take a risk. Well, with Abram on her side, by his lack of response to her ways toward her mistress, the Lord would be on Sarah's side, and absolutely agree. Sometimes men go too far in their headship role or sense of authority, and they wrong their wives, and they don't say anything, and they let it go on, and that's not right. So this is what's happening in this situation. So it's a very good practical lesson about it, and I don't think I would have gotten into this idea unless I had seen that in John Gill. I guess I give him a lot of credit for that. So, but now look what happens. Abraham repents. How do we know? Look what he says. And Abram said unto Sarai, behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee. In other words, I relinquish. I'm sorry. I should have been more aware of the situation. I'm sorry. She's your servant, and I'm not going to protect her anymore, or whatever, and I'm not going to put up with her doing that to you. So this is a statement of repentance. I'm giving her back to your power alone. And even though she's pregnant, take over where you left off with her. Well, Sarah's got a bit more on her plate than taking over where she left off, because Sarai dealt hardly or harshly with her. She let her have it. I mean, I don't know what she did. I don't know if she physically abused her or not, but she must have just laid the law in for the first time now. I mean, all that comes out of her in a torrent of abusive language and talk, and making her do this and making her do this, probably very humiliating things or whatever, clean out the dung, the animal dung or something like that. I mean, whatever she was making her do, perhaps even hitting her. I don't know. I mean, it says harshly. The word hardly there is Old English. We use the word harshly now, but so what happens is she fled from her face. That word face is the word presence. It just means she got away from her. She ran away. Okay. Now let's follow Hagar down the road. So now we come across verse 7 here. It says, the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness. And if I understand the thing so far, this fountain here is a well, And it's we learn in verse 14. It's called Bir Lahoi. Sorry, Bir Lahoi Roy. Well, that's a mouthful. The word beer in Hebrew is well. It means a well of water. You can get the connection between beer and water, right? So there you go. But Bir Lahoi Roy. Okay, that's the name of it. But I took a look, and turns out that if, as far as we know, but I believe it's true, that Abraham was living in Hebron. Okay. Hebron is about 30 miles south of where Jerusalem would come to be later on. But Bir Lahai Roy is about, according to my measurement, is around 55 or 60 miles south and slightly east of Hebron. That's how far she got. Well, which tells me something. In order for her to be this far away from, if that's 55, 60 miles, and she's a pregnant woman, and she's, well, I don't know how she's running, or I don't know, did she have an animal or something? I don't know. I guess if I were her, I would have gotten an animal. That would have helped. But what I would have done if I were her, and this is probably what she thought it was, she didn't flee like an about face and run away immediately. It's just that she woke up one morning early before anyone else got up, got a couple skins of water and some food or whatever, and got an animal and took off. That's, I mean, she certainly has the rights to those things. Look at her status as the pregnant by Abraham. So I'm sure she has something like that going on, because I can't imagine how anybody could flee for 50, 60 miles, through desert areas. This is all desert area, without having planned it ahead of time to some degree. This is just my way of looking at this thing. So I'm just trying to help you to see a little bit more details here, but that's what I would say here. So she is at this fountain of water in the wilderness. So with desert areas, it's pretty hostile. She also, the thing is, she also has, she's in danger of bandits and other kinds of bad actors in the area. I mean, it's like, wow, it's like, this is quite a trip. And you can't do 60 miles in a day. You can do maybe 20 on a good clip. So this has got to be an animal. It has to be an animal. This is the only thing I could think of that's making this work. I mean, the Bible doesn't necessarily have to tell us that sort of thing, but I'm just thinking about it, right? Anyway. So we have this angel of the Lord finds her. The angel of the Lord would be the Lord himself. The angel of the Lord is usually an appearance of Jesus in the Old Testament, that expression. And we can tell by the kinds of things that he says to her as we continue, right? And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence camest thou, and whither shalt thou go? Okay. So what's her answer? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. Now she answers the first question. And it's interesting that, I just thought of this at the moment here, the fact that he says Hagar, Sarai's maid, tells her that who this is that this has to be someone this has to be God, because he knows me by name and who I was working for. So you're not talking to anybody else but me. It's a very personal statement to be called by name and by her employment arrangement. It's interesting. So she feels like, okay, this really is the person talking to me, and I'm the one he's talking to, So, so she answers the first question, which was, whence comest thou? Where'd you come from? Whence is where in New English. English is now where, not whence. She said, I flee. I'm running from the face of my mistress Sarai. But she doesn't answer the second question. And whither wilt thou go? I think she can't answer that. because really, like I said before, she got expatriated by Pharaoh. So she's not really welcome back in Egypt per se, because she is property of Abraham, to whom Pharaoh gave her. See? So she's not welcome there. She's in the middle of a wilderness. She's at a well, but what's she going to do? Live there for the rest of her life? So she has no answer, because there isn't one. She doesn't know where she's going. She's just running away from something, which just happens in so many crises in our lives. Make us run away. But we have no idea where we're going when we do. Oh, this life is so hard. And usually what makes it hard is other people. If anything makes life hard, is other people, which is exactly what's happening here. Other people are making her life bad, which is Sarah, right? I don't have anything else. I belong to her. You know, I mean, where is she going? She's going nowhere. She's going nowhere. She can't answer that question. And which is why I think the Lord asked her. Because he made her think about what's next. I don't know. I'm lost. Isn't that the sinner? The sinner, we're told that he that does evil walks in darkness and doesn't know where he's going. He's fleeing into the dark, has no idea what his goal is. Where's he going? And it's nowhere good, because you're in the dark. She's in a wilderness. It's no place for a pregnant woman. So what is the Lord's answer? And you might balk at this a bit. I don't know. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, return to thy mistress, this person who's treating you harshly, and submit thyself unto her hands. Well, having looked at the fact that she has nowhere to go, and she already belongs to someone else. She's running away from a situation that she's already contracted to stay with. Submit to it. Go return to thy mistress, and submit thyself unto her hands. So, in reality, the Lord is giving her the only answer that there is for her. Now, with his encouragement, having talked to him, now it's interesting that so far in the whole story of Abraham, the Lord has appeared and talked with Abraham, I think about 7 times by now, and never has he spoken to Sarah directly. But lo and behold, the Lord has personally spoken to the mother of Ishmael, Abraham's concubine wife. Is that interesting? That of the 3 people, 2 of them have had the Lord appear to them and talk to them. Abraham and now Hagar. So she's got an awful lot here. She's got the Lord behind her. If God be for us, who can be against us? Let's take a look at this, as is Romans 8, right? Let's take a look over there and see what it says there. Right, the very last verses in the chapter. For a second. My computer slowly gets there. Verse 31. What shall we say then to these things? Well, what shall we say to these things going on with Hagar? If God be for us, who can be against us? It's not as bad as Hagar is thinking, and her experience, it just isn't as bad as she thinks. Because if she comes back voluntarily, I think it's going to make a difference, at least to some degree. This is my opinion about the matter. But God has told her to go back. Okay? Go back. And it's something else, you know. She's your legal authority. And this is something we don't like about legal authorities, is because they're often harsh and cruel and so forth. But if they are they are ministers of the law that is in the land. And we don't like that submission. We just don't like it because sometimes the law is not very friendly toward us. And the people that run it are often, not our favorite people as being in power. We don't want bad people in power. We only want good people in power. Hagar wants a good mistress, not a bad one. This is just this life. This life, it does not offer to us what we would ideally want. And a big virtue in the life of the Christian is humility. He's telling her to take a humble approach to the situation. Look what it says under here. Verse 1 Peter 5:5, we'll look at this, for example. Likewise, ye younger, he's talking to young Christians there, submit yourselves unto the elder. In other words, because they have charge of your soul, we learn. Yea, all of you be subject one to another. In other words, it's mutual respect and mutual submission. It isn't just only one person over everybody else and that's it. It's everybody submits to somebody in one degree or another. And be clothed with humility, which is what he's telling Hagar to do. Be clothed with humility. For God resists the proud, which is what? You could see some pride in Hagar. We already learned about Hagar, so we're not telling tales about her out of school, but she lorded it over her mistress. She went condescending. She went superior over her mistress. There's some pride in her, isn't there, to be like that? Wouldn't you say? Well, there's pride in people. God goes after pride. He says this, God resists the proud. You don't want God resisting it because he's strong. When he resists us, man, we are under the gun. It's not fun at all, right? But he gives grace to the humble. In this case, the submissive. He's talking about submission, submitting. He's putting those all things together. And this is what the Lord is telling Hagar. Go and submit to it. Yeah, because you need some humility in your life, Hagar. Your uppityness has cost you the situation you're in. You're fleeing because you kind of started it, by your attitude towards Sarah. All of a sudden, you were like, elevating yourself over where you should have been out of pride, right? Anyway, but look what it says. Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. Well, look at this expression, under the mighty hand of God. What did the angel tell the Lord? What did the Lord tell Hagar? Submit under her hands. Hand of God, hand of Sarah. Same thing. This takes a lot for us, doesn't it? And then, of course, that he may exalt you in due time. Now, there will become an exaltation when she gives birth to Ishmael. Now, things aren't going to go completely rosy for her later on because we learn that she gets kicked out by Sarah later on when Ishmael, the son, mocks Isaac at his weaning party. But this is some time ago. But she is going to have exaltation at her birth. It's going to be news throughout the entire area. I'm telling you, because this is talk that goes on in that area where he's living. And look what it says here. If you're dealing with something like this, it says, "Casting all your care upon him, for he cares for you." It's obvious. It's so obvious that the Lord cares for Hagar. And primarily because she's Abraham's concubine. And she's a mother now from Abraham. So there's an awful lot of connection that she has personally to God. And he cares for her. I think that now that, let's go back to where we were there. Okay. Because of this very personal interaction between the Lord and Hagar. She knows that she can call upon him. She can cast her care upon him because he cares for her. What that would mean in her life coming up, I don't know so much. I don't think things are 100% relaxed between her and Sarah, but Sarah, I'll tell you something though. If I were Sarah and I realized that my servant had fled, and and I would probably be able to figure out it's because of the way I was treating her, and she comes back voluntarily in obedience to God, it's got to have an effect. That's just the way I see it. It's going to have a moderating effect on Sarah, in my opinion, and on Abraham too. Abraham doesn't want her to give birth in some foreign place where he has no idea where she is, does he? I mean, he's worried. He's worried to death over her, and I think, and with cause. That's what I think. Okay. So I think we have some good lessons from this these verses here. I don't want to go too much into the next verses, even though this angel still is talking with her. Well, yeah, I'll pick that up next time because I don't want to make this too much longer, okay? I think instead of going into that topic, because there's more to say about what's coming up in the next part, okay? So let's just close in prayer here and ask the Lord's blessing. Lord, thank you for this time together. And thank you for the lessons you put in your word, that we might have our own hope and our own instruction, because that's what the Apostle Paul says, that these things are written for our instruction, Lord. And I just thank you that you might give us grace to be what we should be in you, because without your grace, we're only going to be in ourselves, and in our flesh dwells no good thing. But we do ask that you might amend us, Lord, and give us the humble spirits that we each need in our own lives, that we might have and gain the characteristics of Christ, who said that he was meek and lowly in heart himself, and that he would place his yoke upon us, and that we could learn from him. For his yoke is easy and his burden is light. We thank you for that, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.